Going to this proceeding, basically, there are 4 elements that I have to receive information regarding them. Everybody, look at that in here. Now, what's the electricity on? What's the light? What's the light?
We do have a special report from NBC News. There has been a massive explosion at a federal building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. It happened just a short time ago.
Early this morning, driving to downtown Oklahoma City, the whole downtown was covered with big black puffs of smoke. It was unbelievable. I was driving down there. I thought maybe it was just a big warehouse.
There was an explosion. It happened about an hour ago, as you said earlier. Happened at about 9 o'clock. You may have felt it at about 9 o'clock. It was at the Alfred Murrell Federal Building in downtown Oklahoma City.
A massive car bomb exploded outside of a large federal building in downtown Oklahoma City, shattering that building, killing children, killing federal employees, military men, and civilians.
Look at the Regency Towers there. Almost all the windows have been blown out of that hotel complex there.
Police were told by a witness that he saw at least 2 men in blue jumpsuits running away from a minivan outside the courthouse just before the blast. The witness told investigators the 2 men fled in a brown pickup truck.
A local congressman believes that convicted bomber Timothy McVeigh and his accused co-conspirator Terry Nichols are not the only ones involved.
The Oklahoma State Representative Charles Key produced a videotape featuring witnesses who claim to have seen Timothy McVeigh with another man the morning of the bombing.
He was wearing a ball cap. Timothy McVeigh had his on backwards, which just like this. It was on his head. The other gentleman had his on like this.
In fact, the FBI had actively pursued John Doe No. 2 in its initial investigation, then denied his existence altogether.
Our investigation of the Oklahoma City bombing in the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building has uncovered the following. John Doe No. 1 is and always was Timothy McVeigh. John Doe No. 2 is Michael Brescia, an Army buddy of Timothy McVeigh who served in the same unit. Until recently, he was in federal custody. The federal government has protected and hidden the identity of Michael Brescia because he is an informant. How do I know that Michael Brescia and Timothy McVeigh are John Doe No. 1 and John Doe No. 2? Because they came to visit me, not to visit me, but to visit Tim Lesperance in St. John's. They didn't even know I was there. Michael Brescia, John Doe No. 2, is the man in the original sketch of John Doe No. 2, and it's such a good sketch, it could have been a photograph. He was the leader. He did all of the talking. Every single word he said. Timothy McVeigh just nodded once in a while, didn't really pay too much attention to what was being said, and every once in a while, if he was asked a question by Michael Brescia or by me or somebody else, he would chip in. But he was not the leader. It was clear that Michael Brescia was in charge, 100% completely in charge.
The early news report said that John Doe 2 was seen with McVeigh in Michigan and in Kansas and in Arizona. And now the government comes up and says, oh, and also in Kansas he was seen renting the truck with him, right? Now the government's coming up, oh, it's just by coincidence that this particular person that they drew the artist's conception from happened to be in the rental shop at the same time, had nothing to do with McVeigh. This all doesn't make sense. And now the latest thing, as of this date, is that these are 2 guys, McVeigh and Nichols, out having a beer, decided they hate the government, went down there and blew up the federal building. That's a joke.
The Justice Department is reporting that a second explosive device has been found in the AP Murrah building in downtown Oklahoma City. Mike, you're still with us, aren't you?
Yes, I am. And I might tell you, in addition to that, in fact, what we were told at the scene a few minutes ago was that, in fact, 2 different explosive devices were found in addition to the one that went off.
The second explosive was found and diffused. The third explosive that was found, and they are working on right now as we speak, I understand, both the second and third explosives, if you can imagine this, were larger than the first.
They'll back that trailer down there, and the bomb squad folks will go in
and they will use that that trailer. You see the bucket on the back there, sort of, this is how they would transport the explosive device away from this populated area to try to do something with it.
I just took a look down the street at the Murrah building again. I see another bomb truck going, so apparently they're going to try to get out that third bomb that's been talked.
One device was deactivated. Apparently there's another device, and obviously whatever did the damage to the Murrah building was a tremendous, very sophisticated explosive device.
One source was Carol Howe, a government informant. She revealed that federal agencies had prior knowledge of the terrorist plot and were ignoring several figures linked to the bombing. Roger Charles is a retired Marine colonel and former correspondent at ABC News. His news team interviewed Howe and obtained confirmation of her testimony.
So here we had confirmation from a government representative in Denver with the McVeigh Prosecution Task Force saying, your facts are accurate. So we think we've got a slam dunk story. It will be a piece of cake to get it on air now because we have confirmation from a government spokeswoman that our facts are true.
The story was ready to air on ABC Evening News, but to Charles' surprise, the story never ran.
A few minutes later, a phone rang. Tom Gerald from ABC 2020 was on the phone to Thrasher saying the story had been killed for the evening. Didn't know why, but the decision in New York was not to run the story on Peter Jennings' nightly news that night.
In order for the story to air, Charles reworked it following suggestions from New York.
Well, the next morning, Don Thrasher gets a call from New York, and he gives me one of these. I couldn't believe it. I knew what the signal was. The story was not going to go again.
Federal building. And in the midst of all this pandemonium, this stunning development.
Got one more bomb. Let's get out of here. Let's move everybody back.
That rumor proved to be false, but it delayed the search for survivors for 2 hours.
His knowledge of the celebrated seismogram from 9:02 a.m. on April 19th may be surpassed only by that of his colleagues, Drs. Ken Luza and Ray Brown, who also just happened to concur with Dr. Mankin. Something happened in that event to cause 2 separate bleeps of some 5 seconds each to appear on the seismograph.
So having that kind of information was puzzling as to why you'd have 2 separate events that gave virtually identical signals.
Dr. Mankin explained that he and his colleagues believed this to be caused by subsurface structures creating a delay in the signal's travel time, thereby reflecting a mirrored event. However, he was quick to point out,
so while that explains the rationale for the 2 different signals, we're still left with the issue of how do you explain the duration of each of those signals.
They arrested me. First it was protective custody. I argued with that. I objected to that. Then they brought up charges upon me, falsely. Indicted me with a grand jury indictment the day before we was going to have a probable cause hearing, because they didn't have any evidence for a probable cause hearing. So they used the prosecutor's grand jury rubber stamp. Afterwards, they let me out. Finally, after 3 court hearings, the judge said that he sees no evidence. They presented no evidence to connect me. And then Janet Reno come on last Thursday, the 10th of August, I think it was, said that I'm totally exonerated. They had no evidence. Well, if they didn't have any evidence after another 60 days of surveillance and investigation, how did they have enough evidence to put me in prison to start with?
And obviously, whoever did it, the official death toll is 20. The injured, of course, more than 100. Actually, the death toll is significantly higher than that. The entire north face of this building is collapsed, pancaked one floor in on another. It occurred this morning at 9. All these floors were filled with people. These are floors that have bullpens, a lot of federal employees, a lot of my friends in the Secret Service, ATF, DEA, HUD. It's an awful situation.
Of course, they have a lot of help with the federal agencies, particularly the FBI. But the genie is kind of out of the bottle after the World Trade Center bombing. We're susceptible, and it's the price that we pay for living in a free and open society. So it's a very difficult job to undertake.
They told him is that he thought that they had received a tip that morning of the bomb.
Yet another witness, a rescue worker, says after she talked with an agent at the bombing scene, she also suspected the ATF was warned and agents stayed away from their office that morning.
I asked him if his office was in the building, and he said yes, and I asked if there were any ATF agents that were still in the building, and he said no, we weren't here.
Witness number 1 approached an ATF agent nearby. He claims he asked the agent what had happened, and witness number 1 says this is what the agent told him.
He started getting a little bit nervous. He tried reaching somebody on a two-way radio. Couldn't get anybody, and I told him I wanted an answer right then. He said they were in debriefing. None of the agents had been in there. They had been tipped by their pagers not to come into work that day. Plain as day out of his mouth. They were tipped. Why wasn't anybody else? There was a lot of people, good people, died down there.
We're at the Murrah building that morning.
We're asking simple questions and we can't get any answers, so it makes us that much more curious, you know. Where the hell were they?
The news channel did ask for a private meeting with ATF officials to discuss the credibility of these witness reports, but the ATF refused, saying they had no more to say on the subject.
Bombing in Oklahoma City was an attack on innocent children and defenseless citizens. It was an act of cowardice, and it was evil. The United States will not tolerate it, and I will not allow the people of this country to be intimidated by evil cowards.